Today, I am talking to an amazing gentleman. He is a contribution to students across California, and especially at his home school, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. He is an associate professor. He became an associate professor in record time, and he's also a Gallup certified strengths coach, which means he knows how to bring out the best from other people. I have had the pleasure of having him work with me on my strengths, and it just blew my mind in terms of figuring out why I get stopped some places and don't get stopped others. This is Professor Danny Almeida. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Robin.
I'd love for you to share something about yourself with our audience.
I'm originally from New Bedford, Massachusetts, which is a small fishing community in southern Massachusetts. And my family, although we've been in the United States for 3 or 4 generations, are originally from the Cape Verde or Cabo Verde Islands. They're a group of islands off the west coast of Africa. So Lots of times people ask me, "What are you?" And so I actually now have a tattoo, Cape Verde, and I won't show you I have the islands on over here, because I basically all my conversations start out with some version of that, because people are always looking at me like, "Where are you from?"
My very first question to you is, what's your favorite song and why?
My favorite song right now. It could have been the same answer if you asked me in 1985 or so, because that's when the song's from. And I play the cello, and I've been playing, songs and posting them on Facebook and sending them to people. And I just happen to get stuck on "That's What Friends Are For" by Young Warwick. And I'm like, I used to love and sing the hell out of this song as a kid. I played it the other day and sent it to the only friend from high school that I still really keep in touch with. And of course she was crying and, all the rest of it. That's my favorite song right now, and I can't get it out of my head. So it just evokes so many positive memories of friends over the course of my life. And then, of course, this friend, who's my oldest friend, at least the oldest friend I keep in contact with, I'm officiating her wedding, which is scheduled for July, and I'm doing it remotely because and she's getting married in Rhode Island.
So are you also an ordained minister, or
as of a month ago, I did it online. Which is not very hard. You just need a credit card. I have to add that to my credentials of some kind. I haven't.
Right? Absolutely. The good Professor Reverend Almeida. Okay. Danny, what's a favorite childhood memory?
The one that came up for me was going to Disney World with my mom and my brother. I have from a blended family, and my mom has 2 sons, me and my brother, and my dad has another son and a daughter, and 2 sons that passed away. And reflecting on it, it was the experience, but also that was the only time the 3 of us had gone away together. My mom's side of the family, they all pooled their money together to send us to Disney World, because we would have never gone otherwise. That was the last time we all traveled together, and also the last time I've traveled with my brother.
And I'm just curious, are you and your brother close?
I have several brothers, but he's the one who lived with us the most, and that was more present in my life than the others. So a little bit maybe closer to him. We love each other a lot. We don't necessarily check in all the time. We've checked in a bit more during the pandemic, but I think as an adult, I've developed different relationships with each of my siblings in ways that I wouldn't have envisioned when I was a kid.
So basically, you're actually growing in your relationships as you age, which is not always the case.
Because they're all, my brothers anyway, they're all 12, 13 years older than me. They all have children. So I think that's what's gotten me closer to them in a sense, is that I've been the uncle and some of their only uncles. I'm definitely the uncle that's most present, even though I live 3,000 miles away from them.
I love that. And I just want to touch on the childhood memory. I find it just beautiful that your family wanted you to participate in that and all got together to make that happen.
They were all my great aunts, actually. They're my mother's aunts. A lot of them, and even of that time, didn't have their own children. So they treated their nieces and then their nephews and then their kids as their kids and grandkids. So I grew up with a whole bunch of that around me. I spent a lot of time with senior citizens when I was in my teens and earlier. There's 2 of them still left, but They mostly passed away, but they're very much part of my life still, in my experiences and who I am today. And the other thing about that experience that I mentioned, that going to Disney World, I'm pretty sure that was like right before my other brother Rico died. I've been reflecting a lot about this as an adult, in that, like, there's a cloud over everything else that happened after that. We don't talk about it that much. Both of my older brothers, David, the one that went to Disney, this was his stepbrother that died. Yeah. And then my brother Eric, they both went off, got into trouble, and one of them went to prison for some time. After that, one was going to go to college, and then that summer before going to college, instead got in trouble and went to jail for 5 years instead of going to college for 5 years. So anyway, like, I always thought, oh, I was lucky that I was only 5. But I also think that it impacted me in a lot of other ways. And I think, up until that point, everything was just, I'm a 5-year-old kid. And then you have a sibling pass away all of a sudden. And then all the adults in your life, including your older brothers, are consumed with that. So I think that in some way, like, maybe even highlights the positive experience about going away because of what came after.
What is an accomplishment that stands out for you? And if there's any difference, an accomplishment that other people are impressed by, like they're super impressed by, but for you, it's like, yeah, all right, go on.
Yeah. One of my brothers, he reminded me that I was the first male on that side of our family to graduate from college. And my nephew, my oldest nephew, just graduated in May. From Indiana University, and him graduating college is part of my greatest accomplishment, or my part in that. Like, I helped him apply. He found this program at his school, and I helped him with the essay and the application and everything. That the program ended up paying for him to go to school for 4 years and made him part of this like cohort of first generation students of color. And he got offered a job in LA where he wants to work in the entertainment industry in his senior year. It was his dream job in a sense. A lot of people might have said, I got to do it now. But he called me up. He was doing an internship. He was like, Uncle, like, they want to hire me now. And I'm like, that's great, but you have 1 semester left of school. He talked to my dad and my brother too, and we all found out afterwards, oh, thank God he talked to you. Thank God he talked to you. And my brother always reminds me of that accomplishment, that, not only the 4 years he was in college, but also the years leading up to that. And then just being the only person he could look to, at least a male that he could look to that did it. I'd say that, and then the same breath of achieving my PhD. And my brother says that's where he can like say to like his kids, listen, like, it's just, college is just an expectation. Look at your uncle. They don't all have to get a PhD necessarily, but like, because I set the bar is what he always says. I'm lucky to have family that will remind me of that. Yeah, my greatest accomplishment.
It's a pretty significant number of minorities that will attend college, but not necessarily graduate. And there are a host of reasons for it. It could be needing to go and get a job and then that becomes the priority, and then there's no time back. There are all kinds of reasons that disrupt. Kudos to you for making a difference so that your nephew would go on.
I couldn't help him financially or anything. There were other people like my dad and his grandmother filled in those kind of gaps, but we all, it's the whole, it takes a village thing. It's like,
I was just thinking that. Yeah.
And like, we, that's what we did. And now he's part of that village to make sure that his sister is going to be something. She's competitive too, so she wants to put him to shame, I think. I'm really excited for the next generation of Almeidas. The second question, I am the principal investigator of a multi-institution National Science Foundation grant of $2.7 million. I applied for it in my second year, maybe it was my third year. I was told, like, you can try, but you're not going to get it on your first try. You probably won't get it on your second try. Maybe you'll get it on your third try. And I got it on the first try. It's the first time, like, I could be assured that I got this not to do with anything to do with who I am, meaning my race or affirmative action or anything. in the white world, especially, they're like, oh my God, an NSF grant. Like, I haven't got an NSF grant. Like, you know, NSF, National Science Foundation, is like the pinnacle. It's like the Harvard of grants, so to speak, you know.
Okay. Wow, that's
so I
good to
get a
know.
lot of, like, when people find out, it's like, oh my God, you know, like, some of their oh my gods are not, oh my God, you're a Black person who got it. It's like, oh my God, you're young or you're inexperienced or something like that. But the point is, I had the highest scoring grant that they received that year, and it's a blind review. They didn't know what race I was. They didn't know anything about me, and they scored it. And I don't have that many of those experiences where they didn't know who I was. So I know that I didn't get that from affirmative action. Like, that can sort of combat all those other. In high school, when I got into Stanford and Dartmouth and University of Pennsylvania, and other kids white kids in my high school, that is, didn't, then it started, the racial slurs started to flow more, in the sense of like, oh, he only got that because he's Black, or affirmative action, or whatever. It didn't, and I actually also had higher SAT scores than them, and was involved in more things than them, and more AP classes than them, but they chose to, I knew that at the time, but I think I've carried that sort of baggage with me through every accomplishment I've had, especially in academia, getting into school, anything that could be deemed subjective, where in this era, you know, some people do want to give people of color a chance. So maybe they gave me the job because they want to diversify their workforce or their office or what. You can't help but have some of those imposter syndrome doubts, because I think it's a common phenomena of people of color, and also maybe even more so women of color, but men of color too.
Well, let me ask you something. Do you, given that experience, do you support programs like affirmative action, or do you think?
I do. You know, at one point in my life, I had a hard time with affirmative action. You know, in 2003 was sort of when it was like in the Supreme Court. It was around the time I was in graduate school. And as a person, I didn't like the idea that people would assume that I got something because that I didn't deserve, or quote unquote didn't deserve. My grandfather had this attitude of like, you're not going to get that job because, you know, because you're Black, you're going to get it because you were the best candidate and all this stuff. And so I think he sort of like resisted that sort, and he never went to college. I don't even know if he graduated high school, but he worked in a place called Rodney Metals in Massachusetts. But he was like the boss of all these people, all races, you know, and he did not get that because he was Black. Let me tell you, especially in those years, he really was the best, and they couldn't deny him the job because he was the best at it, you know. And I got a lot from him, but I also think in that way it had me maybe not be as accepting of the idea of affirmative action as a system, for everybody, in the sense that in affirmative action often is, you know, if there's like, you know, a tie, or so to speak, like then you can give the shot to a person of color. Or what my cousin's husband, who's white, just said to me, affirmative action is not even about people of color. It's about white people and their racism. And it's a check on all this historical racism that even though I wasn't alive when a lot of that stuff happened, or other white people weren't slave owners themselves, or whatever they want to say, we all have that baggage of history. And ultimately today we have to handle those inequities that stem from hundreds of years ago.
There's still vestiges of that.
Oh my God,
here today. I didn't know what your answer was going to be, right? But I remember in high school, 12th grade, I didn't know that Stanford sent all of their acceptances on the same day. So I go home, I was accepted, I'm excited, I go to school the next day. Everyone starts to ask, well, did you? And it turns out I went to a primarily white high school, but I was the only one who got in that year. So I'm sitting in my math class. I'm engineering bound, right? And
exactly what I was too, by the way, in my math class.
Right. And so math had always been my favorite class, always, which, you know, is unusual as a stereotype, but it was.
Yep.
And so this teacher was my favorite teacher. I won't even give him credit by mentioning his name. But here's what happens. This is fifth period. It's after lunch. All the news is passed around. The kid who sat in front of me, whom I had joked with, a white male student, we used to joke all the time. He raises his hand and says, "Mr. Blah, 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 why did Robin get in and nobody else get in?"
Oh my God.
While there could have been a different answer, what this teacher, whom I had up to that point adored, said was, "They have special programs for Black people." I know. Trust me when I tell you. It was back there. So I hear you. And if the fact that you're sharing that, I'm sharing that, I know that this is not an uncommon experience.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I hope anyone who's listening and who has had that backdrop of, did I really get here because I am capable?
Yeah.
And anyway, I just appreciate you bringing that up.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry that happened to you, and I hope that happens less, but I can imagine it's still happening now.
Your favorite quote, saying, or book?
I pulled it out over here because I have it on my refrigerator, so I remember it's Oprah, a quote from Oprah saying, "I want to spend my days maximizing happiness." And sort of like the strengths that you mentioned earlier, I want everybody to spend their days, by the way, maximizing happiness, not just me. But I think anything that I want to see other people do starts with me, especially the people who I teach or the people I work with. So luckily for me, a lot of the things that maximize my happiness are, making other people feel good and making other people happy. I mean, that also has its bad side or shadow side, as I call it, of our strengths, that, being a people pleaser, but like contributing to other people, having other people succeed, having other people be happy is part of me maximizing my own happiness. I also have to recognize there are things that I can do that have nothing to do with other people that can make me happy, that I deserve as well. So I'm working on that.
Is there a conversation or an event or a moment that you can look back and go, that changed the trajectory of my life?
It was my advisor in my master's program who suggested that I check out Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, which I always say I wish I had the little piece of paper where I tried to spell that the first time, because I'd never heard of it. So I ended up moving to California and working there as a staff member. I worked there for 2 years and then moved to Southern California and thought I would never necessarily work there again. Now I work there again now as a faculty member. So I don't know that I'd have the job now if I hadn't worked there the first time and had that experience. So I often think about like, wow, but she sort of, directed me in that direction for some good reasons. Like she was a white woman and I ended up in a town that has less than 1% Black people, moving to California, where I thought I was moving to the diverse California.
Right.
So in that way, it was probably like maybe not the best fit, and that's the other reason why now I work at Cal Poly, but I live in West Hollywood, Los Angeles, mostly because of that, because I needed to see more people of color. I remember I was at a gas station, I was like, oh my God, I saw a Black man. I was like, I don't remember the last time I saw a Black man. I gotta move, So
I get it.
Yeah.
We're gonna transition a little bit here.
Okay.
What's a moment or event that highlights your experience of being a Black man in America?
The moment or the event is Barack Obama being elected, but it might have been actually like the speech he gave at the Democratic National Convention, which ironically, I went to the Democratic National Convention 3 of the 4 days in 2004. I was in Boston and my roommate at the time was working for the convention. I went when Bill Clinton spoke, when Hillary Clinton spoke, when John Kerry, John Edwards, all those things. But the day I missed was this random guy giving the keynote, Barack Obama. And I was at the Kerry headquarters watching him speak, and probably was the only person of color there watching at that point. So I was still, in the mix of the politics at the time. And also, so I also have this, one of my friends, she posted this thing on Facebook saying like how she used to say that I'm the whitest Black man or whitest Black kid at the time she ever knew. And now she realizes how, problematic and racist that statement was. And it was really nice, the post that she posted. But I've gotten that, as you could imagine, a lot of different times in my life. Like, you're not really Black, or, You're not. And
Mm-hmm.
I think Barack Obama also got that at different points in his life. I mean, he was mixed, and was raised by his white mother. I wasn't raised by anybody that was white, but played the cello, growing up. I've been unpacking this a lot. Why wasn't I like closer with Black friends, Part of it was that I was a little gay boy, didn't know I was gay, and I was shunned by the Black community, and I also shunned by males in general. So white women, white girls were a lot of the friends I had. The friend I mentioned earlier, that's still my friend to this day that I'm officiating her wedding. So anyway, it's just a little context about really Barack Obama sort of defying the odds. I think people said, you can try now, but you probably won't get it, or wait your turn, or all that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, if he had waited, he maybe never would have been president. If I had waited, I'm sure as hell wouldn't have submitted this grant again, because it was so much work to submit it. I said, I'm never doing this, and now I'm already thinking about other grants, Yeah, I think that moment, it sort of like broke the glass ceilings for a lot of Black people and Black men and little boys. Not all of us want to be president, but if he can be president, then I could be senator, or I could be mayor, or I could be professor, or whatever. He blew the top off of, and the fact that he got reelected, I think also getting elected, somebody might say, oh, it was the 2008 crisis, financially, whatever. They would say something. Again, reelected on his record as president, you know what I mean? Like running against a really tough opponent, I think, Mitt Romney, so like, I think he just he just shoved it in their face, which is what I would want to do to some people, as well. With some of the degrees and things, like, here you go.
I feel you. Speaking about putting it in people's face, and as you know, because I shared it with you, the reason I started this is because of all the ways we were learning about Black men only because of a tragedy or violence. And so my next question is, Danny, have you had any interactions with law enforcement?
My first interaction with police was my dad was a police officer. So I grew up living with a police officer and riding in the back of a police car and playing in a jail cell at the police station. And they have
where was this?
New Bedford, Massachusetts. Yeah, he's retired now, but like that gives me a unique perspective. Now, I also had a brother that went to prison for 5 years when I was like 6 years old, and, have seen that side of the justice system, at least from that vantage point, not personally. Now, my dad also is not the type of like hardline police officer. Like they say like they're trying to like remove the job of social worker from police officer right now. But my dad was that. I mean, I feel like he could have been a social worker probably. Like he probably loved that part of the job. He didn't want to get anybody in trouble. He was trying to get people out of trouble, I think. And he had some really good. I asked him, this week about like what were some of your experiences around some of these quote unquote bad cops, and his partner was a really great one, but one time they had responded to the same incident, and these other two white cops beat the crap out of this Black guy, and they were like, didn't know how to handle it, and this, that, and the other thing. And I hear stories like that from him, but like I grew up respecting police in a way, because my family, extended family, were police officers. But now I think when I'm driving in particular and a police car is anywhere, I get so tense. Like, I'm like, why am I getting so tense? It's because of all of what I know happens to other people. Like, it hasn't happened to me. Like, I have gotten pulled over. Actually, the time I want to tell you about, when I did my first time getting pulled over was in New Bedford. And I believe that the cop, he didn't say this, but like he looked at my registration. He says, "Is this where you live?" And I said, "Yeah." And he ended up letting me go. And afterward, I was like, I think he recognized who I was. Like, he knew my dad, or it was my mom's name on the registration, I think. But he knows my mom too. And actually, now that I remember now, my parents do know who that is, because I remember telling them, So I was going 55 and like a 35. I was late for work driving. I also worked for the city. I had the New Bedford Housing Authority. So I think these things like saved me from maybe a different situation in that way.
Experience.
And I think I just respond well to authority, meaning like I just do whatever I'm told, which I don't like about me sometimes, but I think it's kept me safe in my interactions with police officers. I don't know. I've only had 3 times that I've been pulled over, so like I don't have that many to go from. But like the other times, so I was going like 70 miles an hour. So I wonder, like, why am I? And I got tickets all the time. You know, the other two times in California. I haven't had as many negative experiences as other Black men have had for sure. But I got to think that it has something to do with some of that I mentioned. And to be honest, I've been talking a lot about my own internalized racism, particularly as I was younger, trying to be more white or like accepted into the white community, and that's how you can be successful. So I think by how I talk and how I behave and all these things that are signals that I'm whiter or whatever, I wonder if that came out with these police officers where they didn't treat me as poorly. I mean, they weren't necessarily friendly either, but like I didn't have like a really, really negative experience the few times that I encountered police that weren't in my hometown where everybody knew my dad.
I'm very interested as I get through these 365 interviews with brothers. I'll be curious to see, will there be any trends in who tends to have the harsher experiences? Does, how we talk, how we present, does
and my
that...
skin tone, if I was darker, I might have had a different experience too. Like lighter skinned Black people have a degree of white privilege. I mean, nobody thinks we're white. Let me just get that straight. But like, there is like, the darker you are, I think the more likely you're going to get treated poorly. And that's horrible. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have any racism lobbed at us either. But I think I get by through it easier than some others.
Yeah. No, I understand. There's, I think, also something that happens if you are particularly attractive, whether that's particularly handsome or particularly beautiful, then that, you know what I mean? So there are these things. But also, or if you're someone with money, like there are intersectionally, there are these things that can impact how we're treated as Black people.
Let me tell you, I drive long distances because I dress up for the occasion. Because I'm like, if I get pulled over and I got a collared shirt on, I think it's going to go better if I have flip-flops and a t-shirt on. And now I have a Lexus, which I'm nervous about driving my Lexus because people are going to say like, what's that Black guy do? So yeah, it's interesting, this whole, even though I've had positive experiences with police, I still have like the PTSD of everybody else's experiences with police. Everything that's going on has been going on for centuries. It's this.
Right. And when you say this, for our podcast listeners,
a cell phone camera, and even like the first time they actually took a picture of a slave that his back was scarred up from
a beating,
from lynching and beating, from welts. Those images are like when Emmett Till was murdered. His mother had an open casket and made sure the picture was in the front page of Jet and all these other magazines to show like, and those images that media has been key in like the civil rights movement. If there were no TVs, that never would have happened. No Voting Rights Act, no nothing.
I always go over that. I haven't taught U.S. history in a while, but when I do, I always talk about, you can see a relationship between new technologies and new expressions and demands for rights. So when abolitionists became more popular, there was a change in technology where we had the printing press, and it was easier to create pamphlets, mass produce them, and send them out. And every time we get an increase in technology, we get an increase in awareness that spreads to the wider population. And when that happens, then there's movement. If America was a woman, what would you say to her?
I don't like pointing out people's flaws. I don't like making people feel bad about what they said or done. So I probably would start off by saying, you've done some great work. You've lasted a long time as a democracy, like you've spread this, whatever. But everything has like, in the strengths, I'm a strengths coach, so I talk about people's strengths. But every strength has what I call a shadow side. You might be the biggest, most powerful nation, but that has a shadow side to it. And we got a lot of shadows in this country. You got a lot of shadows, girl, is what I would say to her. And maybe not in that way. It just as I would a client that's a strength. Like, how can you use your strengths to address some of your your shadow sides and your weaknesses and your flaws and your blind spots. And that's not for me to like, I don't like always want to like, here's how you use your strengths to do that. It's a conversation. So I would want to have a conversation with her, you know, and talk about the powers that you have being the United States of America. I like when, you know, certain politicians talk about the more perfect union. Like we're always trying to be a more perfect union. We're not perfect. We've never been perfect. There's some people who say, we're perfect. We're the best ever, and all that stuff. American exceptionalism. I still believe that we're an exceptional country for some good reasons and also some not good reasons, not the least of which we have the highest death rate for coronavirus. And of course, that's hitting our community even harder than just like everything else. But like, how do we use the benefits, the positives, the strengths, if you will, to address some of the issues? And one of the issues is like, you know, it's easy financially. We're the richest country on earth, but we're spending our money in all kinds of perverse ways. Like, how much money do we spend on imprisoning Black and brown folks? And how much money do we spend on their education? It's like ridiculous, you know, and even
it's upside down.
Any prison reform that's happening now is only because it costs too much money. But anyway, yeah.
Well said.
So anyway, that's some of what I would say to her.
Very positive, go in good and build up.
but not ignoring the you know, the issues, because that's the knock on sometimes a strengths coach or somebody like me, that you only going to look at the positives. No, I think we got to acknowledge all the bottom. My 34th strength, there's 34 strengths on Strength Finder. The last one, I need to know about that. I need to address that and have support around that and use my talents to address where I might have a blind spot with that, and not just ignore it.
Right. I get it. Speaking of strengths, good stuff, what is love to you?
In one word, it's acceptance. Like, I really think, like, if you love somebody or something, you like fully accept them for who and what they are. And you're really not trying to change them. It's probably in some ways like the hardest question probably of all these questions for some people maybe, but that one, acceptance just came to my mind, and I couldn't get off that word when I thought about it.
I think you'd find some agreement on that.
Yeah.
You've talked about a lot of things that I think point to a different experience, at least in terms of stereotypes about Black men. You're the son of an officer. You play the cello.
Yeah.
You know, your family being from Cape Verde.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that you want to share, anything about you that challenges the stereotype of what a Black man is?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mention some of those very same things. I think the math thing, I always did better in math on like SATs, GREs. I got like a 770 out of 800 on that, you know, sort of thing.
Wow.
There was occasionally a Black girl in my class, but always the only Black male in like AP classes and things like that. And now often the only Black face in meetings and things like that. So how do I defy the stereotype of a Black man? Well, I mean, I guess it's just like the underestimation that people have of us, you know? They underestimate us. And I think I defy expectations a lot. Whatever people expect of me, I'll either exceed them or like they, you know, because they have low expectations sometimes. And that comes out in a lot of different ways, you know? But yeah, that's the thing that I thought of the most with that.
We're finishing up. Now that you've participated in this exploration of your life and accomplishments and experiences, is there anything that you're present to now, anything that showed up as part of the process of doing this interview that you could share? Like, how has this interview impacted you, is another way to say it?
The first thing that's there for me is being proud. Oftentimes we're taught not to be proud, or not, you know, that it's sort of like, I don't know, a sin or you know, to your pride and in that way. But like having the opportunity to reflect on my experiences and my accomplishments, I'm really present to how proud I am to be who I am, and how proud I am to like be recognized for it, and then also to be contributing to other people. Like, I have been reminded by some of my students these are students, I teach in a master's program. So they've all been through undergrad and then some graduate school. And I'm the only person of color, and for sure the only Black man they've had as a professor ever. And so I think I forget how rare, unfortunately, that is, and I think also like just getting the chance to like revisit some of these things with you has gotten me present to a lot of my accomplishments, which I'm sort of like literally the day that I finished my dissertation, I was like, well, what have you done like the next day I was like, well, what have you done today? It's like, it's okay, that's done. I got promoted last week. And if I hadn't posted it on Facebook, I would have completely forgotten about it. Because first of all,
right.
I don't get the raise until September, so I ain't going to see that money. But, and if I hadn't posted on Facebook where people are commenting every day, there's a few more comments or likes.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that happened. Especially this week, it's been like a hard week to celebrate, a hard time to celebrate things.
Right.
With both the pandemic and what's going on in our country, and social and justice and all. So yeah, that's how I'd answer that question. So thank you.
I love it. I'm delighted that that's something that you got out of it. And, I'm just so grateful. I want to just finish the interview by acknowledging you.
Okay.
Danny, I acknowledge you for being a stand for excellence by demonstrating excellence and providing that as a bar, but not as a bar as in it's going to be hard for you to get here, son, but really creating excellence as something that's achievable and available, and then inviting people to do that. I mean, truly, and I would say your life's work is about that, both your working in education, but also being a strengths coach. It says so much about who you are, which is that you truly do get that we can all thrive. Everything that I know about you is that you are a space in which you invite people to thrive. And then if they are willing, you'll even provide them like tools that they can use to do that. That's phenomenal. And I'm really just grateful to know you and delighted that you agreed to be interviewed. Thank you.
Thank you for that acknowledgement. And that the thriving thing is so true. Like we're even using like this instrument called the faculty thriving quotient to see like the program that we're developing with the grant is to develop this community for underrepresented minority faculty in science, technology, engineering, and math fields, using the strengths, what we call a culturally informed strengths-based approach. But ultimately, the outcome we're trying to produce is that they thrive. Like they might still have the same success rates right now in academia, but all the stuff they have to go through to get to that point, can they thrive during it? Like that's what we want to create, and it takes a village, sort of thing. So we're going to have that sort of support system built into our program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. As you can hear, you do not want to miss any of these brothers. Make sure you subscribe. You can find more at our website, 365brothers.com, 365brothers.com. This is Robin Shine. To listen is to love.